The rain had turned the road to mud, and Greta Elsworth's boots were caked with it as she stumbled up to the farmhouse door, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Behind her, chained and gagged in the back of a wagon she had stolen 3 towns ago, was her sister Kira, barely conscious and marked with the slaver's brand. Greta had broken every law she knew to get this far, and now she stood before the only man in 5 territories who might have enough coin to buy her sister's freedom before the bounty hunters caught up with them. She raised her fist and pounded on the door, her green knuckles splitting against the rough wood. Blood mixed with rain on her hands. She did not care. The door opened, and a man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked at her without flinching, which was rare enough. Most humans saw the tusks first, the pointed ears, the green skin that marked her as something other, something dangerous. "Please," Greta said, and her voice cracked on the word. "I need your help. My sister is dying, and I have nothing to pay you with except myself. I will work for you. I will do anything. Please." The man, whose name she would learn was Isaac Kane, stepped back from the doorway and gestured for her to come inside. "Bring her in," he said quietly. "We will talk after I see to your sister." Greta's legs nearly gave out from relief. She turned and ran back to the wagon, her hands shaking as she unlatched the gate and climbed inside. Kira's eyes fluttered open, glazed with fever. She was younger than Greta by 3 years, barely 20 and so much smaller. The slavers had starved her, beaten her, done things that Greta refused to let herself think about until Kira was safe. "It is going to be all right," Greta whispered, lifting her sister as gently as she could. Kira whimpered, and the sound cut through Greta like a blade. She carried her sister into the house, following Isaac through a simple but clean main room into a bedroom that smelled of fresh straw and herbs. Isaac pulled back the blankets on the bed and stepped aside. Greta laid Kira down, brushing the matted hair from her sister's face. Kira's skin, usually the same healthy green as Greta's, had gone pale and sickly. Her breathing was shallow. "What happened to her?" Isaac asked. "Slavers," Greta said flatly. "They took her 6 weeks ago from our village. I tracked them across 3 territories. I freed her 2 days ago, but she is sick. She needs medicine, clean water, food, things I cannot give her while we are running." Isaac nodded and left the room. Greta heard him moving around the house, opening cabinets, the clink of glass bottles. He returned with his arms full of supplies. He set them on the small table beside the bed and began mixing something in a cup, his movements precise and practiced. "You know healing?" Greta asked. "Enough," Isaac said. "I was a field medic during the border wars. Hold her head up." Greta did as he asked, cradling Kira's head while Isaac brought the cup to her lips. Kira coughed, but he was patient, waiting until she could swallow. He gave her 3 small sips, then set the cup aside and began checking her wounds. His hands were gentle but thorough. He did not comment on the bruises, the brand, the marks of chains on her wrists and ankles. "She will need at least a week of rest," Isaac said finally. "Maybe 2. The infection in her leg is bad, but I can treat it. She will live." Greta felt tears burn in her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. Orcs did not cry. Her father had told her that 1,000 times, but her father was dead, killed by the same raiders who had burned their village, and she was so tired of being strong. "Thank you," she managed. "What is your price?" Isaac looked at her for a long moment. "There is no price," he said, "but you should both stay here until she is well enough to travel. It is not safe for you out there." "The bounty hunters," Greta said. "They are looking for us. I stole the wagon. I killed 2 guards when I freed her. If they find us here, they will kill you too." Isaac's expression did not change. Then we will deal with them if they come. For now, your sister needs care and you need rest. When was the last time you ate? Greta could not remember. 2 days. 3. She shook her head. Come, Isaac said. I will make food. You can stay with her while I cook. He left the room again, and Greta sank into the chair beside the bed, taking Kira's hand. Her sister's fingers were cold and thin. Greta rubbed them gently, trying to warm them. She listened to the sounds of Isaac moving around the kitchen, the crackle of a fire being built up, the sizzle of something being placed in a pan. The smells that drifted into the room made her stomach clench with hunger so fierce it hurt. When Isaac returned, he carried a tray with 2 bowls of stew, thick with vegetables and meat and a chunk of bread. He set it down on the table and handed her one of the bowls and a spoon. Eat, he said simply. Greta wanted to refuse. She wanted to insist that she would work for this, that she owed him, that she was not some beggar who took charity. But Kira needed her strong, and she could not be strong on an empty stomach. She took the bowl and ate, and the food was so good she nearly wept again. Isaac sat in the other chair and ate his own meal in silence. When they were finished, he took the bowls and left her alone with Kira. Greta heard him washing the dishes, then the sound of the door opening and closing as he went outside. She looked out the window and saw him unhitching the stolen wagon, leading the horse to a small barn behind the house. He moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this work 1,000 times. Greta leaned back in the chair and closed her eyes, just for a moment. She was so tired. Her body ached from days of running, fighting, barely sleeping. She told herself she would rest for just a few minutes, then get up and help Isaac, prove that she was not useless, that she could earn her keep. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of fresh bread. Panic surged through her and she jerked upright, looking around wildly. Kira was still sleeping, her breathing deeper and more even than it had been the night before. Greta stood and went to the main room, where Isaac was setting a loaf of bread on the table. "You should have woken me," Greta said. "You needed rest," Isaac replied. He gestured to the table. "Sit, eat. I should be working. I told you I would work for you." Isaac looked at her, his gray eyes steady. "Your sister is not well enough to travel. You are exhausted. There will be time for work when you are both stronger. For now, eat." Greta wanted to argue, but the bread smelled so good and her stomach was already growling. She sat and ate, and Isaac sat across from her with his own plate. They ate in silence, and Greta found herself watching him. He was older than her by perhaps 10 years, his face weathered by sun and wind. There were scars on his hands, the kind that came from years of hard work. He did not look at her with disgust or fear. He just looked at her like she was a person. "Why are you helping us?" Greta asked finally. Isaac took a drink from his cup before answering. "Because you need help. Most humans would have turned us away, or worse." "I am not most humans." Greta wanted to press him, to understand what made him different, but she could see that he was not going to say more. She finished her bread and stood. "I will check on Kira." Isaac nodded, and Greta returned to the bedroom. Kira was awake, her eyes clearer than they had been. She looked at Greta and tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "Where are we?" Kira whispered. "Safe," Greta said, kneeling beside the bed. "We are safe, little sister. A human is helping us. He is a healer. Why, I do not know, but he has not hurt us and he says you will get better. You just need to rest." Kira's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was going to die there. I thought I would never see you again." Greta took her sister's hand and held it tightly. "I would have burned the world to find you, you know that." "I know," Kira whispered. "You always take care of me, and I always will," Greta said fiercely. "Now rest. Let the medicine work." Kira closed her eyes and drifted back to sleep. Greta stayed with her for a while, then went back to the main room. Isaac was not there. She looked out the window and saw him working in a field behind the house, turning over soil with a spade. She watched him for a moment, then made a decision. She went outside and crossed the yard to where he was working. "Let me help." Isaac paused and looked at her. "You should rest." "I am fine. And I said I would work. I keep my word." Isaac studied her for a moment, then nodded. He went to the barn and came back with another spade. He handed it to her, and they worked side by side, turning the soil for planting. It was good, honest work, and Greta threw herself into it, grateful for something to do with her hands, something to keep her mind from circling back to the horrors of the past 6 weeks. They worked until the sun was high overhead, and then Isaac called a halt. They went back to the house, and he drew water from the well for them to drink. Greta gulped it down, her muscles burning pleasantly from the exertion. "Thank you," Isaac said. Greta blinked at him. "For what?" "You are the one helping us." "For trusting me," he said simply. Greta did not know what to say to that, so she just nodded and went to check on Kira again. Her sister was awake and looking stronger. Isaac brought her soup and helped her sit up to eat it. Kira watched him with wide, wary eyes, but she did not flinch away from him. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Greta woke early and helped Isaac with the farm work. He had chickens that needed feeding, a small vegetable garden that needed weeding, a fence that needed mending. She worked hard, determined to prove her worth, and Isaac worked beside her without complaint. He did not talk much, but his presence was steady and calming. In the afternoons, Greta sat with Kira, who grew stronger each day. The color came back to her skin, and the fever broke. Isaac changed her bandages and gave her medicine, and slowly, the infection in her leg began to heal. Kira started to smile again, started to talk about the village they had grown up in, about their mother who had died when they were young, about their father who had taught them to be strong. In the evenings, Isaac cooked, and the three of them ate together. Kira was shy around him at first, but Isaac was patient and kind, and gradually she began to relax. She asked him questions about the farm, about how he had learned to heal, about the border wars he had mentioned. Isaac answered her questions honestly, without boasting or exaggerating. He had been a soldier, he told them, conscripted when he was 18. He had fought for 5 years, seen things he did not like to talk about, and when the war ended, he had come to this remote corner of the territory to live in peace. He had no family, no wife, no children, just the farm and the quiet. "You ever get lonely?" Kira asked one evening. Isaac considered the question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I prefer loneliness to the alternative." "What is the alternative?" Greta asked. "Being surrounded by people who do not see you," Isaac said quietly. "Being in a place where you have to pretend to be someone you are not." Greta understood that. She had spent her whole life in a world that saw her as a monster first and a person second. She wondered what Isaac had to pretend about, but she did not ask. Everyone had their secrets. 2 weeks passed, and Kira was well enough to walk around the house, though her legs still pained her. Greta knew they should start thinking about leaving, about finding a new place to settle where the slavers and bounty hunters would not find them. But every time she thought about it, her chest tightened with something that felt like regret. She had grown used to this place, to the rhythm of the work, the quiet of the evenings, the simple pleasure of a good meal and a safe bed, and she had grown used to Isaac. He was different from any human she had ever met. He did not flinch from her strength, did not treat her like she was less than him. He worked beside her as an equal, and when he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she had never felt before. She told herself it was gratitude. That was all. But gratitude did not explain the way her pulse quickened when he smiled at her, rare as those smiles were. It did not explain the way she found herself watching him when he worked, admiring the strength in his arms, the focus in his eyes. It did not explain the warmth that bloomed in her chest when he thanked her for her help, or the way she wanted to stay close to him, to hear his voice, to make him laugh. She was falling for him, and it was the most foolish thing she could do. One evening, after Kira had gone to bed, Greta sat outside on the porch looking up at the stars. She heard the door open behind her and Isaac stepped out, sitting down beside her on the step. "You are thinking about leaving," he said. It was not a question. Greta nodded. "Kira is almost well. We cannot stay here forever. We are putting you in danger." "You are not," Isaac said. "No one has come looking for you, and even if they did, I can handle myself. You do not understand. The bounty on my head is 500 gold. That is enough to make men do terrible things." "I understand better than you think," Isaac said, "but I am not afraid of bounty hunters." Greta turned to look at him. "Why do you care what happens to us? You do not even know us." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I told you I was in the border wars," he said finally. "What I did not tell you is that I fought against orcs. I killed them. Men, women, it did not matter. I was told they were monsters, that they were the enemy, and I believed it because it was easier than questioning." He paused, his jaw tight. "One day we raided a village. I was ordered to clear a building. Inside, I found a woman and 2 children hiding. They were terrified. The woman begged me to spare her children. She did not beg for herself, just for them." Greta felt her breath catch. "I let them go," Isaac continued. "I told my captain the building was empty. I do not know if they survived the rest of the raid, but I like to think they did. After that, I could not keep fighting. I finished my term and left. I came here to try to be someone different, someone who does not turn away people who need help." Greta felt something shift inside her, a wall she had built around her heart cracking just a little. "That woman," she said softly, "she was lucky you found her." "No," Isaac said, looking at her. "I was lucky she showed me the truth, that orcs are not monsters. That I was the one who had been monstrous." Greta reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. His skin was warm and rough with calluses. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face, and the expression in his eyes made her chest ache. "You are not monstrous," she said. "You are the kindest man I have ever met." Isaac's hand tightened around hers. "Greta," he said, and his voice was rough, "you do not have to leave. You and Kira, you can stay here if you want. We have no money to pay you." "I do not want money." "Then what do you want?" Isaac hesitated, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked uncertain. "I want you to stay because you want to, not because you owe me. I want you to stay because this place feels less lonely with you here. I want you to stay because when I look at you, I see someone brave and strong and beautiful, and I do not want to watch you walk away." Greta's heart was racing. She knew she should be cautious, should protect herself, but she was so tired of being afraid. She leaned closer to him, and he met her halfway, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. His thumb brushed over the curve of her tusk, a gesture so gentle it made her want to cry. "I want to stay," she whispered, "but I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of wanting something I cannot have. Of letting myself care and losing it all." Isaac's eyes searched hers. "I am afraid too," he admitted, "but I would rather be afraid with you than alone." Greta closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was soft and tentative at first, a question more than a statement. Isaac answered by pulling her closer, his hand sliding into her hair, and the kiss deepened into something hungry and desperate. Greta had been kissed before, but never like this. Never by someone who held her like she was precious, like she was something worth cherishing. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Isaac rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "Stay," he said again. "Please." "Yes," Greta said, "we will stay." The next morning, Greta woke early and went to the kitchen. She wanted to surprise Isaac by making breakfast, a small way to show her gratitude for everything he had done. She was mixing batter for pancakes when Kira shuffled into the room, yawning. "You are up early," Kira said. "I wanted to make breakfast," Greta said. "Isaac has done so much for us. It is time we did something for him." Kira smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "You like him?" Greta felt her cheeks heat. "He is a good man." "He is," Kira agreed. "And he looks at you like you are the son." "Kira," Greta said warningly. "I am just saying," Kira said, holding up her hands. "I think it is wonderful. You deserve to be happy, Greta. You have spent your whole life taking care of me. It is about time someone took care of you." Greta turned back to the stove, blinking against the sudden sting in her eyes. "I am happy," she said quietly. "Happier than I have been in a long time." "Good," Kira said, coming over to hug her. "Then we should stay here, make this our home if Isaac will have us." "He wants us to stay," Greta said. "He told me last night." Kira grinned. "I knew it. I could see the way he looked at you. He is completely taken with you." Greta laughed despite herself, and the sound felt good. It had been so long since she had laughed. She finished making breakfast, and when Isaac came in from the barn, his eyes widened in surprise at the spread on the table. "You did not have to do this," he said. "I wanted to," Greta said. "Sit. Eat." They ate together, the three of them, and the conversation was easy and warm. Kira teased Isaac about his terrible singing voice when he worked in the fields, and Isaac admitted that he had been told more than once that he sounded like a dying goat. Greta laughed so hard she nearly choked on her food, and the sound of her laughter made Isaac smile in a way that lit up his whole face. After breakfast, Kira announced that she was going to take a nap, though Greta suspected she was just giving them time alone. Isaac and Greta went outside to work on mending the chicken coop. They worked side by side, and every so often their hands would brush, sending little jolts of awareness through Greta. "Can I ask you something?" Isaac said after a while. "Of course. What was your village like?" "Before it was destroyed." Greta set down her hammer and looked out at the fields. "It was small," she said. "Maybe 50 people. We lived in the foothills near the forest. We grew crops, raised goats, hunted in the woods. It was a hard life, but it was ours. My father was the headman. He taught me and Kira how to fight, how to survive. He said the world was not kind to orcs, so we had to be strong. He sounds like a wise man." "He was," Greta said, her throat tightening. "He was also stubborn and proud. He would not leave when the raiders came, even though we could see them coming for days. He said we would not be driven from our home. He died defending it." Isaac reached out and took her hand. "I am sorry." "It was 2 years ago," Greta said. "Kira and I survived because we hid in the root cellar. After it was over, we buried the dead and tried to rebuild. But the village was never the same. People left one by one until it was just us and a few others. Then the slavers came. They took Kira. Yes, I was out hunting. When I came back, she was gone. I found tracks, followed them for weeks. I traded everything I had for information, and when I finally found the slavers, I waited until dark and broke into their camp. I killed 2 guards and freed Kira, and then we ran. That took incredible courage." Greta shook her head. "It was not courage, it was desperation. Kira is all I have left in the world. I could not lose her too." Isaac squeezed her hand. "You will never lose her. She is safe here. You both are." Greta looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, and felt something settle inside her. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she believed it. They were safe. They were home. The weeks turned into months, and Greta and Kira settled into life on the farm. Kira's leg healed completely, and she threw herself into helping with the work. She had a talent for growing things, and the garden flourished under her care. She planted herbs and vegetables. coaxed flowers to bloom around the porch, and spent hours talking to the chickens like they were her friends. Greta worked alongside Isaac, and they fell into an easy partnership. He taught her how to repair tools, how to read the weather, how to coax the stubborn plow horse into cooperating. She taught him some of the orc fighting techniques her father had taught her, and he was a quick learner, his soldier's instincts kicking in. They also learned each other in quieter ways. Greta discovered that Isaac liked his coffee black and strong, that he hummed when he was concentrating, that he had a habit of rubbing the back of his neck when he was tired. Isaac learned that Greta was fiercely protective of the people she loved, that she had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard, that she was terrible at sewing but would stubbornly persist until she got it right, and they learned how to be together. How to exist in the same space without words, how to communicate with a glance or a touch, how to steal moments alone when Kira was not watching, kissing in the barn or holding hands while they walked to the creek. They had not talked about what they were to each other, not in so many words, but it did not matter. Greta knew what she felt, and she was almost certain Isaac felt the same. She saw it in the way he looked at her, the way he reached for her without thinking, the way he said her name like it was something precious. One evening in late summer, Isaac asked Greta to walk with him. They left Kira reading by the fire and walked down to the creek that ran along the edge of the property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They sat on a fallen log by the water, and Isaac took her hand. "I need to tell you something," he said. Greta's heart stuttered. "What is it?" Isaac looked at her, his gray eyes serious. "When you first came here, I thought I was helping you because it was the right thing to do, and it was. But somewhere along the way it became more than that. You became more than that." He paused, his thumb rubbing circles on the back of her hand. "I did not expect to feel this way about anyone. I thought I was done with wanting things. But then you walked into my life and everything changed. You are brave and strong and beautiful, and you make me want to be better than I am." Greta's breath caught. "Isaac." "I am in love with you," Isaac said, and the words were quiet but firm. "I have been for a while now, and I know this is complicated. I know the world will not make it easy for us. But I do not care. I want to be with you if you will have me." Greta felt tears prick at her eyes, but this time she did not fight them. She let them fall because they were not tears of sadness or pain. They were tears of joy, of relief, of a happiness so intense it felt like it might crack her open. "I love you too," she said, her voice breaking. "I have loved you since the night you let us in, since you cared for Kira without asking for anything in return. You are the best man I have ever known, and I want to be with you more than I have ever wanted anything." Isaac pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, burying her face in his chest. He held her tightly, his hand stroking her hair, and she felt safe in a way she had never felt before. Like she could let go of all the fear and pain she had been carrying, because he would catch her if she fell. They sat there by the creek until the stars came out, talking about the future, about the life they wanted to build together. Isaac told her he wanted to expand the farm, maybe get a few cows, build a bigger house. Greta told him she wanted to teach Kira to read and write, to give her the education their father had never been able to afford. They talked about children, maybe someday, and what it would be like to raise them in a world that might not accept them. "We will teach them to be strong," Greta said. "And kind, like you." "Like both of us," Isaac corrected. "I could not do this without you." When they finally returned to the house, Kira took one look at their faces and grinned. "It is about time," she said. Greta laughed, and Isaac shook his head, but he was smiling. They sat by the fire together, the three of them, and Greta felt a contentment settle over her. This was her family now. This was her home, but the peace did not last. It was a cold morning in early autumn when the riders came. Greta was in the garden pulling up the last of the summer squash when she heard the sound of hooves on the road. She looked up and saw them, 6 men on horseback, all armed. Her blood ran cold, bounty hunters. She dropped the squash and ran for the house, bursting through the door. "Isaac, Kira. We have company." Isaac was already moving, grabbing his rifle from the corner. Kira came out of the bedroom, her face pale. "Is it them?" she asked. "Yes," Greta said grimly. She went to the window and looked out. The riders had stopped at the edge of the property, sitting on their horses and surveying the farm. One of them, a man with a scarred face and a cruel smile, pointed toward the house. "What do we do?" Kira asked, her voice shaking. "We defend ourselves," Isaac said calmly. He loaded the rifle and checked his pistol. "Greta, can you fight?" "Yes," Greta said. She went to the corner where Isaac kept his tools and picked up a heavy iron poker from beside the fireplace. It was not her preferred weapon, but it would do. Isaac moved to the door and opened it, stepping out onto the porch. Greta followed him, and Kira stayed in the doorway behind them. The riders urged their horses forward, stopping just outside the fence. "Morning," the scarred man said, his smile widening. "We are looking for 2 orc fugitives. A woman and a girl. We have reason to believe they are here." "You are mistaken," Isaac said evenly. "There is no one here but me and my family." The scarred man laughed. "Your family, huh? That is a good one. Everyone knows you live alone, Kane. Now step aside and let us do our job. We will make it quick." "No," Isaac said. "You are not welcome here. Leave." The scarred man's smile faded. "We do not want trouble with you. Just hand over the orcs and we will be on our way. You do that and there is even a reward in it for you, say 100 gold. "I said no," Isaac repeated. He raised the rifle, pointing it at the scarred man. "Leave. Now." The riders exchanged glances, and Greta saw their hands move toward their weapons. She stepped forward, gripping the poker tightly. "You are making a mistake," the scarred man said. "There are 6 of us and only one of you. 2 of us," Greta said, her voice hard. "And you will find we are not easy to kill." The scarred man sneered at her. "Big words for a slave. You should have stayed in your chains." "Come and put me back in them," Greta said coldly. "If you can." The tension snapped like a bowstring. The riders drew their weapons and Isaac fired. The shot rang out and one of the men fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder. The others scattered, taking cover behind the fence and the trees. Greta ran forward, vaulting over the fence with a roar. She swung the poker at the nearest rider, catching him in the ribs. He went down hard, and she kicked his sword away before he could grab it. Another rider charged at her on horseback, and she dodged to the side, swinging the poker at the horse's legs. The horse reared, throwing the rider, and Greta was on him in an instant, slamming the poker down on his arm. He screamed, and she hit him again, this time in the head. He went still. Isaac fired again, and another rider fell. The scarred man cursed and fired back, and Greta heard the bullet whine past her ear. She dove behind the wagon, her heart pounding. Isaac was crouched behind a water trough, reloading. Their eyes met, and he nodded. 3 left, he called out. "I see them," Greta said. She peered around the edge of the wagon. The scarred man and 2 others were advancing on the house, using the fence for cover. Kira was still in the doorway, and Greta's blood ran cold. She could not let them get to her sister. She ran from behind the wagon, drawing their fire. Bullets kicked up dirt at her feet, but she kept moving, zigzagging to make herself a harder target. Isaac stood and fired, and one of the men went down. Greta reached the fence and vaulted over it, landing in a crouch. The scarred man was right in front of her, and she swung the poker with all her strength. He blocked it with his gun, and the force of the impact sent shockwaves up her arms. He kicked at her, catching her in the stomach, and she staggered back. He raised his gun to shoot her, but Isaac was faster. The rifle cracked and the scarred man jerked, blood blooming on his chest. He looked down at the wound, surprise on his face, and then he fell. The last rider turned and ran, spurring his horse into a gallop. Isaac aimed but did not fire. They watched him disappear down the road, and then the silence was deafening. Greta stood there, breathing hard, the poker still clutched in her hand. Isaac lowered his rifle and walked over to her, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," Greta said. I am fine." He looked past her to where Kira stood in the doorway, her face white with shock. "Kira." "I am okay," Kira said, her voice small. "I was so scared." Greta dropped the poker and went to her sister, pulling her into a tight hug. "It is over," she said. "They are gone." "One got away," Kira said. "He will bring more. Then we will deal with them," Isaac said. He came over and put a hand on Greta's shoulder. "But for now, we need to clean this up." They spent the rest of the day dealing with the aftermath. Isaac tended to the wounded, though 2 of the men had died. They buried the bodies in a clearing beyond the farm, marking the graves with simple stones. Greta felt no guilt for what they had done. These men had come to take her and Kira, to drag them back to slavery or worse. They had made their choice. That night they sat by the fire, exhausted and shaken. Kira had gone to bed early, too tired and scared to stay up. Greta sat close to Isaac, her head on his shoulder. "That man who got away will go to the authorities," she said quietly. "He will tell them what happened here. They will come for us." "Maybe," Isaac said. "Or maybe he will decide it is not worth the trouble. We defended ourselves. They attacked us on my property." "You killed humans to protect orcs," Greta said. "The law will not see it the way you do." Isaac was silent for a moment. "Then we leave," he said. "We take what we can carry and go somewhere they cannot find us." "Where?" "West, past the frontier. There are settlements out there, places where no one cares who you are or where you came from. We can start over." Greta lifted her head to look at him. "You would leave your farm, your home." "This place is just land," Isaac said. "You are my home, you and Kira. Wherever you are, that is where I want to be." Greta felt her eyes burn with tears again. She kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it, and he kissed her back with the same intensity. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "Then we go west," she said. "Together." They spent the next few days preparing. Isaac sold what he could to a neighboring farmer, a man who asked no questions and paid in cash. They packed their belongings into a wagon, taking only what was essential: food, tools, blankets, Isaac's rifle. Greta found herself looking around the house with a pang of sadness. This place had been a refuge, a haven, but Isaac was right. Home was not a place. It was the people you loved. On the morning they were set to leave, Greta stood on the porch and took one last look at the farm. The sun was just rising, painting the fields in gold. She thought about the first night she had come here, desperate and terrified, and how much had changed since then. She had found safety, yes, but she had also found love. She had found a future. Isaac came up beside her, slipping his hand into hers. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes," Greta said. "Let us go." They climbed into the wagon, Kira sitting between them, and Isaac snapped the reins. The horse started forward, and they left the farm behind. They traveled west, following the old trade roads until they reached the frontier. The land there was wild and untamed, and the settlements were few and far between. But they found a place, eventually, a small community nestled in a valley between 2 mountains. The people there were a mix of humans, orcs, and even a few half-elves. They had all come to the frontier for the same reason: to escape the prejudices and constraints of the world they had left behind. No one cared that Greta was an orc or that Isaac was human. No one cared that they were together. They were just another family trying to make a life. Isaac bought a plot of land on the edge of the valley, and they built a house together. It was smaller than the farmhouse they had left behind, but it was theirs. They planted crops, raised chickens, and slowly built a life. Kira flourished in the new community, making friends and learning to read from an old school teacher who lived in the settlement. She grew into a confident, capable young woman, and Greta was proud of her. As for Greta and Isaac, they grew closer with each passing day. They worked side by side, building their home and their future. They laughed together, argued sometimes, made love under the stars. And through it all, Greta felt a happiness she had never thought possible. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Isaac took her hand. "I want to ask you something," he said. Greta looked at him, curious. "What is it?" Isaac reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. He opened it, revealing a simple silver ring. "I know we do not need a ceremony or a piece of paper to be together," he said, "but I want the world to know that you are mine and I am yours. Will you marry me, Greta?" Greta felt her breath catch. She looked at the ring, then at Isaac, and saw the love and hope in his eyes. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. He pulled her into his arms and she held him tightly, feeling like her heart might burst with joy. They were married a week later in a small ceremony in the settlement. Kira stood beside Greta as her witness, and one of Isaac's new friends, a grizzled old trapper named Elias, stood beside him. The ceremony was simple, just a few words spoken before the gathered community, but it was perfect. When the officiant pronounced them married, Isaac kissed her and the crowd cheered. Greta felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears. She had never thought she would have this. A husband who loved her, a sister who was safe, a community that accepted her. She had everything she had ever wanted. The years that followed were good ones. The farm prospered, and so did the settlement. Greta and Isaac became respected members of the community, known for their hard work and generosity. Kira eventually married a young orc man from a nearby settlement, and Greta stood beside her on her wedding day, just as Kira had stood beside her. And then, one spring, Greta realized she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening as they sat by the fire, and he looked at her with such joy and wonder that she could not help but laugh. "Are you sure?" he asked, his hand resting on her stomach. "I am sure," Greta said. "We are going to have a baby." Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "A baby," he said, his voice full of awe. "Our baby." The pregnancy was not easy, but Greta was strong, and Isaac was by her side every step of the way. When their daughter was born, a tiny, perfect baby with green skin and her father's gray eyes, Greta wept with joy. They named her Mara after Greta's mother, and she was the light of their lives. Mara grew up surrounded by love, by parents who adored her and an aunt who spoiled her. She grew up knowing that she was special, that she was a bridge between two worlds, and that she was loved for exactly who she was. One evening, when Mara was 5 years old, she climbed into Greta's lap and asked, "Mama, how did you and Papa meet?" Greta looked over at Isaac, who was sitting across the room whittling a toy for Mara. He met her eyes and smiled. "That is a long story," Greta said, brushing a strand of hair from Mara's face. "Tell me," Mara said. "Please." Greta thought about that night so many years ago, when she had stood on Isaac's porch, desperate and terrified, with nothing to offer but her own labor. She thought about how he had opened the door and let them in, how he had cared for Kira without asking for anything in return, how he had given them a home and a future. "Your father saved us," Greta said softly. "Your Aunt Kira was very sick, and I had no way to help her. I came to your father's house, and I offered him everything I had to save her, But he did not take anything. He helped us because it was the right thing to do, and somewhere along the way we fell in love. Did you get married? Mara asked. We did, Greta said, holding up her hand to show the silver ring that still sat on her finger. And then we came here and we built this house, and then you came along. Mara smiled, satisfied with the answer. She snuggled into Greta's arms, and Greta held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. Isaac came over and sat beside them, wrapping his arm around Greta's shoulders. I am glad your father saved us, Mara said sleepily, because now we are a family. Yes, Greta said, her voice thick with emotion. Now we are a family. She looked at Isaac and he looked back at her, and in that moment she knew that everything they had been through had been worth it. The pain, the fear, the struggle. It had all led them here to this moment, to this life. And she would not change a single thing. The years continued to pass, and their family grew. They had 2 more children, a son named Gregor and another daughter named Alara. The house was always full of noise and laughter, of children running and playing, of love and warmth. Kira visited often with her own growing family, and the 2 sisters would sit on the porch and talk while the children played. Greta often thought back to that first night, when she had knocked on Isaac's door with nothing but desperation and hope. She thought about how he had looked at her without fear, how he had opened his home and his heart. He had asked for nothing in return, and in doing so, he had given her everything. She had bargained everything to free her sister, ready to sell her labor, her freedom, her very soul if it meant Kira would live. But Isaac had paid it all and asked nothing back. And in the end, he had given her something far more precious than she could have ever imagined. A life full of love, a home where she belonged, and a future brighter than any she had dared to dream. One evening, when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Greta and Isaac sat on the porch, watching the stars. Isaac's hair was starting to gray at the temples, and Greta had a few more lines around her eyes, but they were still strong, still in love. You ever miss the old farm? Greta asked. Isaac thought about it for a moment. Sometimes, he admitted, but I do not regret leaving. That place was just a house. This is a home. Greta leaned her head on his shoulder. I am glad I found you that night. I am glad you knocked on my door, Isaac said, kissing the top of her head. You gave me a reason to be better. You gave me a family. You gave me everything. You gave me everything first, Greta said. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love when I did not think I deserved it. You gave me a life worth living. Isaac took her hand, his thumb brushing over her ring. We gave each other a life, he said, and I would not trade it for anything. They sat there in the quiet, holding hands, watching the stars, and Greta felt a peace settle over her, deep and lasting. This was her life. This was her home, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. The children grew, and eventually they had children of their own. Greta and Isaac became grandparents, and their house was filled with the sound of grandchildren's laughter. They grew old together, their bodies slowing but their love never wavering. And when the time came for them to pass from this world, they did so together, holding hands, surrounded by the family they had built. Their story became a legend in the settlement, a tale told to children on cold winter nights. The story of the orc woman who had bargained everything to save her sister, and the human man who had paid it all and asked nothing back. The story of 2 people from different worlds who had found love in the most unlikely of places, and who had built a life together against all odds. And in the valley between the mountains, in the house that Greta and Isaac had built with their own hands, their family continued to thrive. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried on their legacy, a legacy of love and courage and hope. And they told the story of Greta and Isaac so that it would never be forgotten, because some loves are so strong, so true, that they transcend everything. They transcend prejudice and fear, hardship and pain. They are the loves that change the world, one heart at a time. And Greta and Isaac's love was exactly that, a love that had started with a desperate bargain and had grown into something eternal. Mara, their eldest daughter, stood in the house many years later, now an old woman herself, surrounded by her own children and grandchildren. She looked around at the walls her parents had built, at the life they had created, and she smiled. "Tell us the story, grandmother," one of her grandchildren said. "Tell us about great-grandmother Greta and great-grandfather Isaac." Mara sat down in the rocking chair that had been her mother's, and she began to speak. "It started on a rainy night," she said, "when a desperate orc woman knocked on a stranger's door." And as she told the story, she could almost see them. Her mother, fierce and brave, willing to sacrifice everything for the sister she loved. Her father, kind and steady, opening his door and his heart without hesitation. She could see them falling in love, building this home, creating this family. And she knew that their love would live on, passed down through the generations, a testament to the power of compassion, of courage, of choosing love even when the world says you should not. The story of Greta and Isaac was a story of hope. And as long as there were people to tell it, that hope would never die. The sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. In the house that love built, the family gathered, their voices rising in laughter and conversation. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between the words, the spirits of Greta and Isaac smiled, knowing that their love had created something beautiful and lasting. They had started with nothing but desperation and hope, and they had built a legacy that would endure for generations. A legacy of love that had asked for nothing and given everything. A legacy that proved, beyond all doubt, that love could conquer anything. And that was the greatest gift of all.